Good evening, and welcome to the August 17th study session of your Ashland City Council. Mayor Graham should be joining us shortly via Zoom this evening. And today we have 3 items on our agenda, starting with the Ashland Police Department Annual Report to Council. Chief, welcome.
Thank you, councilors and mayor. Ty O'Mara, Police Chief. I come to you again, albeit a little bit tardy, with the annual report to City Council, previously called the Use of Force Report. I'm capable of running through this pretty quickly, so if you have any questions, please tell me to pump the brakes. Use of force incidents are down from 25 to, and just for clarification, normally we'd present this info in like May or June. So most of it is for calendar year 2025, even though we're mostly done with 2026. There is a little bit of year-to-date data for 2026 that we'll get to in a second. Use of force incidents in 2025 were down from 43 to 31. The incidents included 7 deployments of a taser, but not actual firing of a taser, which is a conducted energy weapon. Lethal shotgun, which shoots a beanbag round, was displayed, not used. Pepper spray was not used. A firearm was displayed on 5 occasions. The expandable baton, which is not carried by all officers at this point, was not used. 7 officers were injured, all minor. 9 suspects reported being injured, all minor. All use of force incidents are reviewed by the department's use of force board this year. All incidents were found to be within policy. I always like to point out that I have been before this body pointing out that some previous in the past instances were found to not be in policy, so this is not a rubber stamp. Everything is reviewed. All the body-worn camera footage is reviewed. Last year, we handled 27,054 calls for service. That's about 80 calls for service every day, which means that less than 1.5%, the cases we handled, 2,273, less than 1.5% of the cases we handled resulted in the use of force. As we've talked about in previous years, it's hard to predict, it's hard to nail down what contributes to a lower or higher. I think it'd be easier to nail down what contributes to a higher use of force, but the lower, the good one, is a little bit more hard to figure out, but we'll continue doing good professional police work, de-escalating, trying to spend as much time on every situation as possible. And studies show time and time again that people don't care what happens to them so much as they care about how they're treated when it happens to them. So we want to slow everything down and minimize the use of force. Ashland officers received just over 1,000 hours of training in use of force in 2025, and I will pause there. One other thing that is in the report, but I wanted to touch on. Last year, one of the counselors asked for the data because we changed the data capturing model a couple of years ago, asked for the data to go back. And when I tried to do that, it was just too cumbersome. We are going to collect more accurate data. One of the big points of difference is that previously, if an officer presented a weapon, that was not considered a use of force. Now it is considered a use of force if you just draw your weapon for obvious reasons. We have new technology on the holsters that allow us to best capture that. For example, all of the duty holsters, if you pull your firearm out, it automatically triggers every body camera and every in-car camera system within 30 meters. So going forward from last year onward, we're going to capture that. Any questions on use of force? All right, crime rates and clearance. Part 1 crimes are not really a thing. That's a point of data that's captured by the FBI. It's kind of an antiquated term. I still use it for these just so we have some continuity over the years. These crimes are homicide, rape, robbery, aggravated assault, burglary, auto theft, arson, and larceny. Those crimes are down 25 from 24. There were 227 Part 1 crimes as opposed to 2024's 387. Violent crime is defined as homicide, rape, robbery, aggravated assault. There were 50 violent crimes in Ashland, up from 40 in 24. Our clearance rate for violent crimes remains very high at 66%. That's way above the national average, so I'm very proud of that we've got such a high clearance rate for violent crimes. Yes.
Hey, Chief, do you mind just scrolling so people can see and track with us? Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We're caught up. I think there might be a question here.
Council Kaplan?
Yeah, thanks, Chief. My question is, we're now, for the last 2 years, we've been receiving a monthly report from our judge about the cases that are new cases brought, cases adjudicated in our municipal court. So I'm wondering, how have you done the exercise to see how those two sources of data mesh and inform us better about what's going on throughout the whole system?
Thank you, Councilor Kaplan. And I did spend a good amount of time pondering on this today after you sent the question along. Thank you. The answer is no, that data is not going to match up. And there's at least two reasons for it. One of those reasons is that all of this Part 1 crime reporting does not go to municipal court. Sure. It goes to circuit court. Yeah. So this does not capture the vast majority of stuff that comes over here. The other reason is that the definitions that are in play here are different. For example, I'll give you a crime that would come to municipal court. If I see somebody that is behaving disorderly, that meets the statutory definition of disorderly, I substantiate that criminal misdemeanor case against that person, and I file a charge against that person, be it through taking that person into custody or issuing a citation. That's cleared for me. I'm done with it. I'm never going to touch it again. So for my crime reporting purposes, because I have done all the work that the police officer has to do, and I have presented it to the prosecuting body, be it the city attorney's office or the district attorney's office, it's now in their hands. I'm done with it. That represents a clearance for me. If that case never goes to trial because the person fails to appear, a warrant is issued for that person, and they're just into the ether for the next 10, 20 years, it will not be closed with whatever court it is. But it's already closed with us. We've taken it to our logical conclusion. We can't go any further. That is a clearance for us. It's not a clearance for the court until the case has been adjudicated. There are no outstanding warrants. There are no outstanding fees. So it's not a one-to-one comparison. There's a different framework for each entity. So no, I had never pondered on that until today, but when I did think on it, it's not really, there's no way to really match that up in a clean way.
So I get your point about the cases that go to the district court rather than a municipal court, but some of the cases that you see, they do come to some of the cases on the blotter. They are, their violations, they come to the court. So they're not really captured in here as much, but you have your own tracking system for that. And I get your point about when it's clear, once you pass it on to the judge, then it's closed for you. We get a new cases column on the judge's report, and I'm just wondering if that tracks well with what you've got, so that we've got integrated systems.
I've never looked at it. Okay. If it's the will of the council that's something that I compare, I'm sure I can find a way to put the two columns next to each other. As with all things, there's never going to be a one-for-one matchup on this stuff because of different data keeping standards and whatnot. But we can paint really good pictures, and I'm confident that the two pictures would be substantially similar to each other. I've just never tried to look at that. I assume that the charging information flows the way that it's supposed to, unless somebody brings it to my attention that it's not. We issue a citation or file a report. It goes to the city attorney's office. It comes to the court, and the process plays out unless somebody says, hey, Ty, something isn't working. So I've just never tracked it. Yep.
I've got a question for you, Chief. On the slide you have up here right now, so there's this, looks like a significant, but you said going from 40 to 50. So
right.
To the extent that you could tell a story about this or help us understand this, and if able, compare it to what your colleagues are seeing around the valley, maybe around the state. Is there anything that we can take from this and understand a little bit more of what's happening?
I don't have any great answer for you on that. I would offer that, okay, we look at this part one's crime, and overall, the vast majority of these crimes are property crimes, and they're trending down. And we're going to get to a slide in a minute. I'll go ahead and get there prematurely. That's Cap West with year-to-date 2026, and we see all these downtrends. And so I guess the only comment I would offer is that let's be aware of this. I don't have an explanation for it. I don't know if it's comparable to what other Rogue Valley communities are seeing. I can check on that. We need to be mindful of it. You saw in the packet, and I'll touch on it again, that while crime in some parts of the city is down and crime overall is down, violent crime is up. There were 2 robberies near exit 14 recently, one of them involving the discharge of a firearm. So I guess my contemplation on this is let's make sure we don't celebrate that and that too quickly, because that is still there, and there are robberies that have taken place around exit 14.
Yeah, I thank you. That was my point exactly. I appreciate that. Thank you. Councilor Duquesne.
So Chief, you mentioned, we're looking at violent crimes, and you mentioned rape. Rape is a violent crime.
Yes.
Yes. Is it handled in the same description that you just shared when you were speaking, answering Councilor Kaplan?
I'm not following your question. I'm
How
sorry.
is rape handled? Okay, so someone rapes somebody, then what happens?
So rape is handled in a unique fashion with the Ashland Police Department through our You Have Options program. And there are other departments that have this. I'm proud that it originated with the Ashland Police Department. With most crimes of violence, when the information is presented to the police department, we take action because that's the right thing to do. It is a crime of violence. With sexual assault, because 80-90% of the time it is committed by somebody that's in the victim's circle, somebody that's known to them, we leave that as much authority as possible with the sexual assault victim to decide how to proceed. So that is a crime of violence, but we do handle it through a different investigatory path than we do other crimes of violence, giving the sexual assault victim as much power as possible.
Is there, you said that you leave it up to the victim to handle it, but in a lot of instances, the victim doesn't know how to handle it. Is there an advocate there? Is there someone there for the person?
Yeah, I didn't mean to paint such a simplistic picture. First and foremost, if we have a sexual assault victim, we want them to get the emotional support that they need. The criminal justice side of it can be secondary. Everything is at the pace wanted by the sexual assault survivor. Mm-hmm. So we want them to get the advocacy that they need, the support that they need. We can collect a rape kit from the hospital under anonymous circumstances and just catalog it until somebody comes forward. Somebody can report a sexual assault to us online and indicate that they do not want contact with law enforcement. They only want support services. As much as we can, we will honor that. There are some narrow circumstances where we cannot honor it. So when I say that we leave it to them, by no means do I mean that we are just leaving them to their own devices. We are trying to take that burden off of them, offering them the support that they need, and then as police officers, taking a step to the side according to their comfort until they want us to take a step back in, and then we'll be there with the criminal justice system, but not until they want us to be there and not until they're comfortable with it.
I appreciate that because SART, Community Works, there's so many different community partners that can work with people of sexual assault. So I
Yes.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So to calls for service in the downtown area, did we skip over ELEA? We did. All right, I don't have a slide on this, but the ELEA continues to be an effective tool. Of course, we reconfigured the framework of the expulsion process. It's still judicial based. The difference as of roughly this year is that instead of waiting for convictions, which again can take a long time, it can be charge based off of numerous violations. Generally speaking, 2 misdemeanor charges or 1 felony charge. It is, the authority does remain with the municipal court judge, and there is a robust appeal process that's in place, both for ELEA expulsions and for parks and night lawn expulsions. As of right now, there are 3 people who are under court-ordered expulsion, with 11 people having faced court-ordered expulsion since the process changed at the beginning of the year. And as of right now, there are 21 expulsions in place for individuals from parks and or the night lawn. Same judicial appeal process takes place. We all remember the tumultuous month of May-ish in Garfield Park. And one of the ways that we were able to navigate that, and I'm not saying that this was the only tool that was in play, but one of the tools that was in play at the time was the expulsion process. And a couple of the most negatively behaving individuals, as all of this were going on, they were navigating the expulsion process and the appeal process. And after that all played out, that was I think a significant factor in letting things cool down in Garfield Park, as well as some course changes that council made. Any questions on ELEA?
Yeah, thanks, Ty. And you talked about the changes that have been in place in terms of process since late last year. You were preparing quarterly reports, and you've talked today. You said at the outset that this is a report for 2025. But you said that there were some data that are up to date, and you talked just now as if some of those ELEA expulsions are up to date. Is that in fact for 2026, or are you really speaking as if you were in 2025?
No, thank you. This data is as of about 2 weeks ago when I wrote this report,
Okay.
or a week ago. The use of force data is squarely 2025. The Part 1 crimes data is squarely 25, violent crime 25. The ELEA data is current. Thank you for calling out the distinction. In a second, we're going to get into the Cap West and Cap East crime data, and as of this morning, that is year to date and going back to 2019.
Great, thanks for that. I haven't tracked quarterly reports on ELEA, and I'm wondering, are you drawing inferences from the success, about success of the change of process? You just spoke a little bit about it, but I don't know if that qualifies as success. And also the addition of a second ELEA, is that having a difference, making a difference in the crime that we're seeing within the ELEA and just outside the ELEA? Because my concern when we were talking about this year ago was, is the crime just going to move outside the ELEA?
Right. I am inferring a success.
Okay.
And, I inferred a success from the original enhanced law enforcement area downtown. And that was part of the robust conversation we had around establishing a second ELEA and adjusting this framework. And so I do see a correlation. I'm not going to pretend to have some all-seeing ability to say that's entirely the reason for this drop in reported criminal behavior, but I think that it is safe to infer that we put this new process in place. If you look at this chart, when we really started talking about this was around in 22, 23. We started talking about we established the second ELEA. Well, that's Cap West, so let's get to Cap East for a second, and I'll go back to Cap West. We started talking about the establishment of the second ELEA in 24, off the top of my head. In 25, we were really getting into the adjustment of the framework. I believe that the implementation and the talking about it and the deliberate nature with which we have all been trying to address this has collectively driven reported crimes in that part of the city down. The fact that we have this tool, the fact that as a community we focused on it, that the council is focused on it, that the police department has, navigated this conversation. I think that all of this has come together to bring a more effective tool, and for lack of a more elegant way of putting it, just put the vibe out there that we are tired of seeing this part of the city track up. We want to see it track down. And I'm happy to make that inference.
But the curves that you showed that trending down regardless since 2023 here's in the Cap West also for much longer. So it's part of a longer term trend that's going down in the entire city. One of the questions that we discussed was whether we would see a reaction to people moving their violations outside the ILEA rather than being inside. So have you tracked violations outside the ILEA? The ILEAs?
I have not specifically the way that you're referring to, and if I missed a beat on that, I was going to come back with quarterly reports, and I hit the mark on the first quarterly report, and my intention had been to roll, because again, this presentation was supposed to happen in May or June, so the first quarterly report was in like May, the second quarterly report, and this just kept getting bumped and bumped. And so I'm happy to say that I was negligent in not keeping up on those because it was my intention to just present it in this presentation. So no, we can say that the rest of, or the city in general is trending downward and is continuing, especially from 2017. Off the top of my head, I can't remember where it was before that. The neighborhoods immediately adjacent to Cap East, how those have been impacted, no, I have not tracked that. Again, if it's the will of the council, I can try to dive into that a little bit, but I don't have that. That information is captured here overall. Specifically, this is the downtown area. Again, my first grab of this data, and I do want to point out that just so going forward, we can be on the same page. Historically, the downtown data was captured with a certain group of quality of life offenses like drinking in public, loud noise, drugs and public theft, assault, stuff like that. And then as we navigated this very difficult discussion about Ashland Street, I imposed a different set of data onto that. And so what I have done to capture this data and what I plan to do going forward is that through any part of the city, any geographic area, we're going to look at it through the lens of reported assaults, disorderly conduct, drug violations, liquor law violations, suspicious situations, theft, and trespassing. So through that lens, Cap West, which is downtown from 2019, tracking, and then pursuant to Councilor Kaplan's request earlier today, I did capture year-to-date for downtown, still showing encouraging. That's not the entire year, but I think since we're, 2/3 done with the year, I think, that's looking encouraging. Similarly, Cap East, when we saw the spike in negative behavior with the overdoses and then a little bit of gunplay, and then I think maybe in 23 is when we rented the space across from CVS, and we were trending downwards. Similarly, grabbed this year to date earlier today. We're still looking like we're tracking in a good direction. So to try to not wrap up, but bring a few of these comments together, I think this is very encouraging. I think this is very encouraging. And overall, I think that the city is going in a good direction. The use of force is down. The Part 1 crimes are down, but violent crimes are up. We have an unsolved murder from last year that the detectives are still actively working on, and confidence is high that we're going to get somewhere on that. So again, we can celebrate that things are trending in the right direction for various reasons, and let's not fool ourselves into thinking that that means everything is perfect, because the next bad thing is right around the corner.
Councilor Bloom.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. Thanks for all of this. So yeah, I mean, for me, I think the inference is fair. I mean, really, I think what we should be looking at is the 2024 numbers. I mean, that's when this council really kind of made an effort to make some adjustments to Cap West, implementing Cap East, and I think that there was a lot of kind of tangential other policy decisions that were made that helped to mitigate kind of the rising crime or the crime issue in those particular areas. I do take the point that, we should be looking at the surrounding areas. I think that there's value in that, even though the data shows from 2024 onwards that crime has gone down, irrespective of violent crime, of course. So my question to you, Chief, is if council were to provide some direction to be able to maybe do a little bit deeper dive into various neighborhoods to kind of understand potential impacts that these policies have, would using something like our evacuation zones be helpful because they do kind of break themselves up into specific geographic areas? To simplify it for you?
It's an interesting thought. The question, I think it's an interesting way to look at it. I also think it might be a bit of a moot point or a moot question. The CAD data, the records management systems, I'm confident are not built around evacuation zones. I think that's strictly a communication method for us. And so as we pull this data, there might be some ways to kind of mimic that, but I am confident that those geographic boundaries are not built into the records management system that we use for dispatch. And that's where we pull this data from.
So would it be helpful in the future? I mean, I don't want to rebuild a whole system or want you to have to rebuild a whole system. I'm just trying to think, how do we, to Councilor Kaplan's concern, how do we properly capture individual neighborhoods, or do you have already a system in place to be able to pull that data?
I think we do. There's a system called GeoShield that the Medford Police Department has established that we all use because we use combined resources here, generally led by the Medford Police Department or the Sheriff's Department. And it's a pretty robust tool that I barely know how to use. I'm sure if I spend some more time with our crime analyst, I can build some geofencing and figure out a way to grab some data points.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate your work on this and the officers and all of staff. And I have to say, I commend the department, and I want to say I think I commend this council as well, because I think we've implemented some good policies that's seen a reduction in crime. And perfect is zero, and there's no such thing as perfect in this world when we're talking about these issues. So we should continue to work, but I think that the community should be happy that, yes, it does take time to see an impact, and there's always room for improvement. But we've demonstrated through good policy that we can start to see those improvements. So thank you.
Thank you. A couple more data points here. A few years ago, the Oregon legislature mandated that all police officers capture observed, not inquired upon, but observed demographic data from officer-initiated enforcement stops. So this is not if an officer is dispatched to a scene, but if an officer conducts a traffic stop or a pedestrian stop after the fact, the officer is mandated to record the person's perceived race, gender, what enforcement action was taken, whatnot. And then once a year, that information is published by department for the entire state. The most recent data, which went through June of 25, I think, was for half of 25, had us roughly in line with census data, about 84% white, 1% Middle Eastern, 1% Native American, 8% Latino, 3.4% Black, and about 3.5% Pacific Islander. And one of the things that we need to remember as we're looking at this, again, as a lot of this data is concerned, there's never going to be a one-to-one match. You can go into Wikipedia and you can get one answer for the percentage of a certain demographic that lives in Ashland. You can go into citydata.com and get different. You can go to the U.S. Census Bureau and get different. This data, the stop data, does not allow for somebody to be classified as multiracial, and other data capturing methods do, and there are about 3 to 4% of people in Ashland that do consider themselves to be multiracial. So this is never going to be a one-to-one match. We're an I-5 town, a university town, a tourist town, and I always reaffirm our dedication to treating everybody equitably and in response to the objective facts presented. So these are generally highly consistent with what the Ashland demographic data is. It's never going to be a one-to-one match. Any questions?
Yeah, Councilor Hanson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chief. We appreciate all the data and your and your staff's work for sure. Trend lines look good, but the violent trend line looks terrible. I guess we've been paying attention in the news, so it's no surprise. But one of the things I'm curious when we do these check-ins is your staffing. And I know that we have some potential shifts in management on the nylon. And I'm curious, just like, what does the department look like right now? Are you looking to, with budget season coming up, are you looking to grow, to shrink, to maintain? Could you give us a little update on that and how things might be affected with nylon management?
Sure. The nightlawn continues to be a drain on police resources because we are the default managers of it. So we're all very much looking forward to a potential partnership with ORA for them to take it over. Police staffing is still a work in progress. Of the 31 authorized positions, I think that we have 27-ish filled, and I think maybe about 23 or 24 of those are operational. We've got one at the academy, one in field training right now. We've got one person that's been on duty-related medical leave for the last few months. And so we are not robust, but we have enough to take care of the patrol function and some traffic and a little bit of concentrated area patrol. When school's back in session, the school resource officer will be there. So that remains a priority to build back up to the 31 sworn officers, and that's top to bottom. I have no intention of asking council to expand that in the next budget cycle. I do have every intention of asking council to maintain that in the next budget cycle. But yeah, we're still trying to claw our way back up to where we were pre-pandemic. And it would be pointless for me to come and ask for more people when we're scrambling just to get back up to where we were before.
One more, if I will.
Quick call.
Thank you. We also brought on traffic enforcement last year. And that from where I navigate in town, it seems to be more civil out there on the streets. But how is that working out?
It's working out great. Officer Moore has been a great addition to the team. Officer McLennan was here for a long time before, so we've had a
Right.
motor officer for a long time. Officer Moore was a good recruit from the sheriff's department, and he's fast become a very important part of our team. He helps out with a lot of special events. He is also a field training officer, so sometimes he gets distracted from the motorcycle and he's got to get into a patrol car to teach young officers how to do the job. And we're lucky to have somebody like that to mentor them. So.
Well, it sure does seem like he's had extra attention towards our growing electric motorcycle
Oh, yeah.
contingency, and we appreciate all the work on that. But yeah, thank you for the additional info.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilor Duquesne, and then we'll give it back to Chief. We have 3 speakers that are still teed up.
Okay, I'll be brief. So you mentioned the activity over at Garfield Park, and you mentioned patrol right now. How is that going? Because I know that there was some negative activity there, and there was a request to have APD just go by and do a patrol the area. So how's that going?
Well, everything's a work in progress. The officers try to keep Garfield Park on the extra patrol list. I know that there's been some suspicions of particularly nasty behavior there of the narcotics variety, and the officers are trying to keep that, keep an eye on that as much as they can. The officers, of course, it is generally minimum staffing, and they have the entire city to worry about, so they can't just park themselves at Garfield Park. I know neither you nor anybody else was suggesting that, so they're trying to keep an eye on it as best they can and putting some extra resources into it as staffing and operations allow. Okay, and on that note, the next section is on calls for service in the parks. In the packet and on the board, we've got Clay Street Park, Garfield, Lithia, and Triangle, which I just kind of chose as a random sampling. And looks like suspicious calls, disorderly conduct are among the top. Again, this is in the packet. The ordinance violations for the last several years that were most prevalent are in there as well. Lithia Park looks like camping is always a big one. Garfield Park, barbecue concerns, camping. Any questions on parks data? Okay. Camping ordinance enforcement, the framework for this was changed in 2024, and it allows subsequent, I think, third or more violations of prohibited camping to become a misdemeanor. In 2025, there were 65 enforcement actions. 63 of them were violation, non-criminal level, and 2 were misdemeanor level. It was asked that we bring back information on Spider Tech. We're one of a handful of agencies in the county that participate in this platform. About 90% of calls to ECSO or consolidated dispatch go through a cell phone. So if you call 911 or call the non-emergency number, just like as if you had summoned an Uber or now a Domino's Pizza with your cell phone, they would give you updates on Officer O'Meara will be arriving, and then after the fact, here's your case number or your call for service number, and would you like to offer some follow-up? We have exceedingly high engagement on the follow-up at 28.48%, which according to this platform is higher than the national average and higher than our neighboring communities generally get back. The numbers in there for the between 1,600 and 2,400 responses in 2005 are very encouraging. 4.68 out of 5 for response time, 4.74 out of 5 for professionalism, and so forth and so on. So if there's there's a lot more Spider Tech data that's out there, but that gives everybody a flavor of it. It's all voluntary, of course, and it gets down to the level if you really want to provide demographic information about your race, ethnicity, gender identity, LGBTQ plus inclusion, income level. There's, I think the deeper we ask, the less response we get back, but the overall rate of return is very high, and I'm very pleased with the data that we see coming back. My last point, data point, was that last year there was a request based off of public testimony for information on suicides, and that's really a difficult thing for us to capture. There are calls for service that are called a suicidal person, and I think it was 123 of those came in last year, which again is not to say that 123 people committed suicide last year, but that 123 calls came in that were coded that way. And if somebody is, somebody could be walking in traffic and that comes in as a disorderly conduct, or somebody could be engaged in a domestic violence incident and it could be foundationally that there's some self-harm ideation going on there. So it's a really difficult thing to capture. Again, as we talked about a little bit last year, I have some questions around whether it's the police department's role to keep an eye on that in ideal world. But the quick look that I did for just the number of suicidal calls for service in 25 was consistent with previous years. And I don't know how I can bring that information back other than that. I did check with the fire department and see if they had any way of quantifying that, and they didn't really have it either. So that's the best I got on that. And I am happy to answer any more questions or get out of your hair.
Councilor Bloom and then Councilor Sherrill.
Yeah, thanks, Chief. One last question for me. Very understandably, there's a lot of concern in the community and chatter, and frankly, just wrong information that Ashland has flock cameras within the community. And I know that the city has put out communications to educate folks that that's not the case, but I figured this might be a good time and platform for you to dispel that rumor that we do not have flock in the city of Ashland.
There are no flock cameras deployed in the city of Ashland. There is a traffic sensing, a set of traffic sensing cameras or whatever they are at Ashland Street and Walker that face in all 4 directions. And as Scott Fleury described it to me, it makes the traffic sensing to control the lights go up top so it doesn't have to go in the ground. And that's all it is. There's no data recorded or captured. It's simply to make the lights change color.
Well, and though I think we could have a discussion on improvements to that technology, thank you for saying that. And I think we all have a responsibility to educate our community members so that they're not, going day to day wondering in fear if we have that kind of technology in this community. So thank you, Chief.
Councilor Sherrill.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Chief, for your service and the service of your staff. We appreciate you. Just a question. I mean, we get a lot of data from one of our community's unsworn officers and consistent data. And in this packet that I'm holding that I was handed on the way in that I looked through, looks like there's numerous missing cases, 56. And I know that you're in contact with our advocates in town. Are there any missing reports that just fall off the report or they don't come in time? Can you speak to that at all? Like, is there data that doesn't make it into the report, and is it just because it was redacted, or?
No, there's an awful lot of data that doesn't make it into this report. Okay. For example, if you look at, it's not going to be on a slide, but if you look at the Part 1 crimes, that does not capture stuff like missing persons or petty theft or disorderly conduct or, a runaway. It doesn't capture drunk driving crashes. It doesn't capture fatal drunk driving crashes. It only captures that information. So I'm not presenting this as a total picture of criminal activity in the city. I'm presenting this as a representation of these things by the FBI, and that it is generally a accurate picture of what's going on in the city. Missing people are not included on this. Okay. I will say that there are robust protections put in place around missing persons reporting, if it's a juvenile, if it's an at-risk juvenile, depending on what the situation is. It is mandated to be turned over to a detective for follow-up. It's mandated that DNA samples be taken. It's mandated that there be periodic check-ins. The notion that we all have from popular media is that you have to be missing for so long and you have to be connected to somebody to report a missing person. That's completely nonsense. The best practice is that you can not have seen somebody for 5 minutes and you're nobody to them other than somebody that, I saw my buddy Derek 10 minutes ago and I haven't seen him since, and I want to enter him as a missing person. Okay, cool. We're going to go enter Derek as a missing person. I need no other explanation than that. And we'll follow up, as per policy. So no, that information is not captured in here, but I'm confident that whatever cases are coming in are being handled appropriately.
Awesome. Thank you for the explanation, Chief,
Yep.
and the clarity.
Mayor Graham.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chief. I've just been tracking this for several years now, and I'm so pleased to see that we continue to be out in front. Looks like I'm having some video troubles here. But we continue to be out in front in terms of stepping into these ways of tracking our progress and making sure that we are showing up the way that we should. So the Spider Tech piece, the stop data, all of that, I've just been so pleased that the city of Ashland is right at the forefront of those technologies. Quick question about the suicide rate. I agree that this is not something that the council or that the police can actually manage for us. But I wonder if we might get that from the county with their crisis folks who are dispatched. Is that something, and I wouldn't expect you to do that, but is that something that where maybe the council could look for that data?
I know you didn't ask me to do this, but since you put it out there, I might be able to inquire with the medical examiner's office to see if there's some way to capture that geographically, because any suicide is going to end up with the medical examiner's office. It might not end up with the police department, but I can offer that inquiry if you like.
That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 3 speakers signed up to speak tonight: Kate Hartzell, Paul Mazzina, and Debbie Neiswander. If you please come up, you have 2 minutes each.
Kate Hartzell, I live in town. I appreciate Councilor Kaplan's question about whether the chief considers Elia a success. If this is the only report that we do for Elia, I would recommend that you support the chief in continuing to work with some of us in which these reports didn't involve expulsions, but just generally telling the people on the night on not to go to Garfield Park. I know we have problems there, but if I'm hearing reports about that, I want to help make sure that that's not what people are being told.
Thank you, Ms. Hartzell. Paul Mazzina.
He delegated the whole thing to Pitella, who was the parliamentarian who was responsible for the misconduct of the council on that day. And I think the chief's actions are reprehensible.
Ms. Nicewander.
No, there you go.
Thank you. Okie doke. Okay. Hello, I'm Debbie, and yeah, I'm here to give my annual report as well. I don't know if you all know, but in another lifetime, I was a 911 dispatcher. And part of my job was to create the police blotter. So I'm pretty anal about it. And I tell you, Debbie does data, okay? And I strive for accuracy and transparency, okay? So that's why you get what you get when, anyway. So in the chief's report, on the expulsion orders for the parks and night lawn, I did what Kate said, we need to separate them, but he's also only listing current expulsions. I want the number expulsion year to date. I want to know how many in 2025, not what's happening, right now. And also, I'll give you my report on the Ely East expulsion data tomorrow night because I haven't completed it. It's pretty involved. I also heard that you all are getting the judge's report. Well, I'd like a copy of that too. I think if we're going to be transparent, that should be online somewhere. So I hope somebody puts it out there that we'd all like to see that. Also, yada, yada, yada. we've got a full police department. We got, 31 officers? We need a new municipal court clerk. When you all did layoffs, we missed out on a clerk, and we need to be able to keep up with all the appeals and the expulsions and just to make our court run smoothly. So I hope we consider that during the next budget cycle.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
May I?
Chief?
Yeah, I misunderstood. I think there's some cross communication. There are some, there's some smoothing out on the crime log with the missing numbers and the way that things are coded. And I've got a meeting with the 2 deputy chiefs later on this week to get things coded on the crime log so that they're easier to track by everybody, including by the 2 advocates. And I will gladly break out the parks versus night-long expulsion and year-to-date information in subsequent reports. It's not an issue.
Excellent. Thank you, Chief. Very much appreciated. Have a good night. All right, next up is the Building Division Fee Structure and Dedicated Building Fund. Mr. Goldman.
Well, good evening, Chair Dale, Mayor Graham, and Council. Sitting next to me this evening is Stephen Matiaco. He's our building official and has been very helpful in evaluating how to structure the building fee increases that are being proposed. And so with that, I did prepare a presentation. Let's see. There we are. So essentially, we're before council this evening. We did come to council back in April to talk about establishing a dedicated building fund, supporting full cost recovery for building permits to cover the division's cost. Essentially, this would create a separate fund from the general fund, and the development activity would pay for the inspection services that are rendered by the building division, as well as the plan review. And currently, and I'll go into some numbers in a bit, but currently our division does receive permit fees that cover between 60 and 74% of the department's costs. This proposal is really looking at full cost recovery and establishing a separate fund. The establishment of a separate fund would actually allow for the building division to cover their costs as well as develop a reserve fund so that general taxpayers would not be obligated to support the division in those times that the building activity slows. And also when we came before council, there was a request to come back this evening with a recommended path to cover essentially the permit costs associated with affordable housing. And so we are going to touch on that as well through the establishment of a construction excise tax. I did want to note some underlying assumptions in terms of creating the building fund. As I noted, the review for construction plans and inspections conform to meet state building code. And so our building division is responsible to be certified in multiple disciplines in order to have that. The staff is a full-service local division, so applicants within the city of Ashland can have all their mechanical, structural, plumbing, and electrical permits done within the city of Ashland. Other smaller jurisdictions do intergovernmental agreements to work with Jackson County or City of Medford. We do as well for more complicated electrical permits and so forth that we might use through an intergovernmental agreement, inspectors from other divisions, but it's a one-stop shop in terms of people coming in to get building permits at our counter that they're not sent to the county or elsewhere. The building division has 4.7 employees per the current biennium budget. I will note that with recent staffing, it has been reduced to 4.2 people as one of the half-time plan or building permit technicians has been relocated and as such is no longer part of this department. And that's one of the assumptions I wanted to note is that the fee structure that we've identified in here is for that full 4.7 full-time equivalent staffing. So with that, getting to the nuts and bolts, this graphic, which was included in your packet, does show that in fiscal year 2022, we did have more proceeds into the building division than the cost of operating the department or the division. So that in that year, that would have been over 100% cost recovery, and that additional resources from those permit fees were directed into the building fund. The reason this is relevant is under state law, any fees collected for the building department should be directed to the building division's activities directly. And so that's one of the values of creating a building fund, is that we're not in a situation where excess revenue is inadvertently directed into non-building division costs. Overall, though, if you look at this table, the red columns in 2023, 25, and 26 are areas where the revenues from building permits fell short of the cost of the building division, and as such, that's general fund subsidy into the division. Looking year over year and an average, it amounts to $115,000 in annual subsidy from the general fund into the building division, with 2026 being $262,000 in general funds supporting the building division. And what that supports is really the costs associated with operating. And so in your packet and on the slide before you is some of those costs. You'll see that the lion's share of cost is staffing. Unlike some departments, we don't have a lot of equipment. We do have some fleet vehicles, and those are included in terms of additional costs under the internal charges line item on this. We also utilize professional services, as I noted, for complex plan reviews and third-party contracts. Training and certification is another significant line item. This one is largely mandated in order to ensure that our staff maintains certifications for conducting inspections and doing plan reviews. And also we do spend, we have a technology budget as well that it is utilized to pay for our electronic plan review software, our InterGov permitting software, which is where the public can go online and submit for building permits online. And that information is all tracked internally, allowing plan reviewers from various divisions, fire, engineering, public works, and planning to all comment on building permits as well. So that technology fee will come to point when we discuss the proposed changes. I already mentioned that the intent of the building permit fund is to comply with ORS 455210. Standard practice around the state is that building funds are separate from general fund. Since we met last time, we have reached out to the Building Codes Division and participant jurisdictions there to find out how many are actually general fund supported versus building fund. It is approximately 80% are building fund supported, and of the 20% of the sample that responded to that question, many of them were looking to change to a building fund supported as opposed to general fund, and the majority of those were small jurisdictions that did all of their inspections as contracted as opposed to having in-house staff. Locally, I think one that comes to mind is City of Phoenix falls in that category.
Brandon, would now be time for a quick question. Councilor Bloom?
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. Appreciate it. So I was just curious for this first part. So it says that per ORS 455.210 that it cannot, the building inspection program cannot subsidize or be subsidized by other city services. So I went and read through ORS 455.210 as well as the Oregon Administrative Rules 918. You're familiar with the rest. It's a very long number. Mm-hmm. There is nowhere that I was able to see that it says that it cannot be subsidized by other city services. So it says it can't subsidize, so that's
most
clear.
Definitely.
So I was hoping you could clarify for people that are looking at that, including council, that might read that as, oh
That's
no,
fair.
we can't subsidize this. We can, it's a policy decision, and your recommendation is that we shouldn't.
Yeah, that's
Right.
entirely fair. I think that sentence could probably be better structured. It cannot subsidize other city services, but as evidenced by the historic general fund subsidy of the building fund, we have utilized general taxpayer revenue to support building division services.
Great.
historically.
Thanks for the clarification. I
So
appreciate it.
thank you.
Councilor Hanson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you both. Appreciate your hard work. And I was unclear in the packet, so I'm just curious where the change is coming from. Could you take us back a few steps and give us some history on where this direction is coming from?
Yeah, Stephen might be able to, he's brought this forward a number of times over his tenure, saying that Ashland is an outlier in terms of not having a dedicated building fund. Part of this, I think, gets to council discussions in prior budget years about general fund revenue and the need to ensure that that's being used to support city goals. And the building fund being an individual enterprise fund, we think would accomplish that. So this came forward as a council request prior to your prior adoption of the biennium at a retreat with the council, that we would be coming forward during this biennium to structure this, and got general recognition to move forward with that approach. What we didn't have at that time was a breakdown in terms of how those fee increases would impact different developments. So that was the additional work that we needed to do to come before you this evening. So I think that's where it's coming from. But Stephen, did you have anything to share on that?
Thank you for the question. So I think Brandon covered it pretty well. But I think initially when we had, I think in the 2021 charts, where we had valuations higher than we've seen in my time here, and probably previously as well, as far as when we tracked. So we had a combination of high valuation projects and then the school with their bond. So we had a lot of projects, and then we were, you saw that we were actually making revenue there, and that's when we were saying, okay, well, hold on a minute. It's okay, as Councilor Bloom described, it's okay to be subsidized by general fund, but if we're going to start having revenues, we're probably going to need to set aside a special fund for this. And then with that to compile with, I think the council's directive of looking to see how we could be budget friendly, efficient.
Little follow-up.
Sure.
Thanks. Yeah, I remember those conversations, and I just wanted to bring it up. So we're not looking at a state top-down, this is a must-do. And my secondary question is, with the slump in building that we've seen, I'm just wondering now if this is a double-edged sword, if we're now putting any additional pressure on the building community will be recognized. And the numbers in the packet don't look staggering or overwhelming, but I'm just now asking the question, trying to backpedal a little bit, wondering if we want more growth in Ashland, are we making one correction here which will potentially slow down growth?
It is a correction in terms of trying to create a dedicated building fund that covers the costs of the division. And so that is an increase in fees on individual permits. The question about whether that would stifle the future development, we have seen that the total, if you look at a total project cost, the building permit fees, exclusive of systems development charges and so forth, are roughly between 0.3% and 1% of
Very
a project's valuation. So obviously for some projects that may be a consideration point in terms of the cost, but I don't know if it's a jurisdiction dependent consideration, because somebody looking to develop is facing similar fees in most jurisdictions, as our evaluation showed, that Ashland, even with these proposed increases, would still remain in the middle of the pack, as it were.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the answer, and it's all theoretical, but thank you. Keep going.
And to add to that, Councilor Hanson, that kind of targeted with our methodology for smaller projects not to be affected as much with the increases, to where they would be, larger commercial projects would probably take on more of the brunt of the increase, being, and not being as big of a cost to them of the overall project as well.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilor Sherrill, and then we'll turn it back to Brandon.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Brandon and Steve, both for being here. And I just want to say firsthand, both of your departments give exceptional service. I get to talk to planning and building departments all across the country, and another hat that I wear, and we're second to none. We're not perfect. But to the point that my colleague made about the feast and famine like environment that we live in, and it's really easy to talk about a building. It'd be way easier for me to support this if we were in a high year. In a low year, being an industry standard, many local jurisdictions use a dedicated fund. Some of our neighboring cities that we like to use, rightfully so, as our comparators, and we'll see them in this chart here coming up, are laying people off because revenues are down. So my fear for our citizens are if they need to build a fence or they're trying to get a mechanical permit to put in a hood at their new coffee shop, there's not going to be a smiling face at the front desk. I mean, we lost Kendall. That was a huge loss. This is an investment in our community, not a subsidy. So I'm a little bit like, as you're going through this, just kind of hear one view, and maybe Steve, I know you've took a couple swings at this over the years. What's your response to what do we do when things are hard and we can't turn off long-term stuff? We can't turn off plan review for our subsidized applications that are coming in via nonprofits or schools or the like. And how do we overcome those obstacles if we don't have a subsidy?
Thank you for the question, Councilor Sherrill. So, as you've seen recently with our cutbacks, our counters are not open all the time. So, we can only do what we have staffed, the employee power that we have, which means, what's the priority for the day. So, and the idea of having a special fund for the building department, which is, I would say the norm, right, for the state. A lot of these departments that are under enterprise fund, they've been doing it for so long that they have the reserves. They have the couple-year reserves to be able to, continue on without making those cutbacks. Because, as you know, with construction, it ebbs and flows, right? And a big part of that economic recovery is in construction as well. So keeping those staffing numbers up, they even talk about that when the BCD Building Codes Division does the white paper, for establishing the building fund. And they say it's really important to set up your fees for what you think it's going to cost, and then have percentage above so that you can set aside that reserve, so that you can maintain that staffing, so that you don't have to cut back staff, and then when it's time for construction to get going again. That you maintain, those employees that have, been there, that have, as years go on and you invest into your employees too, you get more efficiencies. And then when you have to lose those people, it makes it tough to restart.
So Jordan, oh yeah, go
Can
ahead.
I follow? I appreciate that response, Steve. I guess the direct question is, if we're already 0.5 FTE down, we transition to something like this, applications continue to decrease 10 to 15% a year, and we look at the trend. Where are we in a year or two? Are you saying we come back and ask for a subsidy then? Because we don't have that buffer. We don't have the rainy day fund that we got during the good years if we start now. Like, what's worst case scenario, I guess, for the community?
Sure, I think we would.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things to note. One is we would be looking at initially capitalizing this fund with the transfer of funding from our funding that was put into our fleet management. I think there's about $135,000 that could move in as a one-time infusion that create a little bit of that reserve fund. But it is structured based on the current year. If we have a year like that next year, it would start to generate a reserve. If the scenario that you outline is a broader economic downturn with multiple years of decrease, I think that we would be in a position at a future biennium to either look at, are there reductions in staffing that are appropriate because there's a reduction in work, or will we be looking to the council to subsidize the division? So as Councilor Bloom brought forth, it doesn't preclude the city from providing general fund revenue to ensure that we have a local full-service building division. So that could be something that was brought back to council if that manifests.
Jordan, did you want to
Thank
add a
you.
little
And
bit?
Councilor Terrell, I'd love to add a bigger picture context for Stephen Brandon as well. We are in an economic downturn, which is leading to less development, less permits coming across the table. But this is still a valuable mechanism to look into because the city's taking other efforts to spur development. So what I see as the city's role in these times is what can we do beyond a relatively minor change in permit fee cost compared to the overall change in cost for construction itself. So the city is hoping to implement an opportunity zone, which will hopefully spur development. I would love to get before council in the coming year an urban renewal program, which also has been shown to really help development get off the ground. And then lastly, we know we have some major projects in the pipeline that could also add to that reserve that would go to fuel the building fund in downturn years. Specifically, really large city projects that are coming through the pipeline that we do expect to have significant permit fees to help support that reserve amount. So I just want to add to the context of, we are using other mechanisms to help shovels break the ground that I really hope will allow us to get our permits back up.
Thank you, Councilor Duquesne.
Thank you for painting this clearer picture because I think the questions are very valid. And I get a sense of why now, because we are going, we're on the downswing. I don't see a lot of development. So my question is if, Jordan, you mentioned that we have all of these good things that are coming down the pipeline, and I think it sounds great, but I don't see the sense of now urgency. I would like to actually see what you're talking about that's happening. For me, I would feel much more comfortable, and I know this is supposed to come back to us if it's approved by this body and everybody wants to move forward. But something that Councilor Hansen brought up earlier, are we going forward or are we going back with this? I don't see how we are really benefiting from this right now. I was reading, and I'll wait till we get to the CETs, but we are not, it takes a long time to build up that fund. Something you said, Steve, some other places already have that fund built up because they did it years ago. We don't have that. So I don't know if we are stepping out and getting over our skis. I don't know what that'll look like. So I'm very curious to see what that looks like because we don't have that build up. So that's my concern. So I think we need to tread lightly.
Councilor Bloom.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. So yeah, a couple of things. I mean, I look at these fees and first of all, I want to say thank you for coming back because this was a big deal for me. I want to see the work. I want to see what this looks like without just giving a green light. So thank you for that. But these fees, I look at them, they're pretty diminutive. I mean, when you look at what the true cost is for development, I don't think that they're that significant. Where the problems lie with our incredibly high SDCs and the long land use process that it takes, how long it takes for somebody to say, I've got an idea and I want to build something to actually being able to put shovels in the ground. So I think that's a separate conversation that we all really need to have. But to the question, I want to kind of hit on this reserve fund, essentially, for the building division. I imagine that there will be some kind of financial policies of what what the ceiling will be, what the minimum will be, and then what will happen if we hit the max and where that money should go. Because I would imagine we don't want to just continue to kind of in perpetuity grow a reserve fund that has minimal need. That said, I'm sure you're going to say we don't anticipate that it's going to grow that incredibly fast, but I'll let you go ahead.
In talking with the finance department, they identified a 15% reserve fund. I think that if we were in a situation where we saw a reserve fund that was looking to vastly outstrip that number, we would probably be in a fortuitous position to look at fee reductions in order to bring it back down to that level. What we would not be in a position of doing is, once establishing an enterprise fund, is taking that surplus off for other non-building division related uses. So, but that would be the adjustment means in that hopeful scenario that you've outlined.
It's music to my ears, and I know it's hopeful. Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon. Continue.
And as I am apt to do, I probably have prepared far more slides than we can get through, but this is an important one because I think what it does is it shows the major changes that are being proposed in the fee structure. First and foremost, looking at the structural permit and plan check fee, that is a fee that is based on the valuation of a project. And so increases in that have a disproportionate increase in the real dollar numbers for large-scale projects relative to small-scale projects. So the intent in focusing both on that structural permit plan check fee and the community development fee was to ensure that small, tenant improvement projects that don't create new square footage, that don't trigger necessarily structural permit changes, and some do, would have a lower dollar value cost, whereas projects that large-scale commercial projects, as Stephen mentioned, would pay that proportionate share. Establishing a minimum permit fee for our mechanical, electrical, and plumbing permits, and going up to $135 for a small permit. That is an increase if somebody were to do only one sink installation, for instance, requiring one inspection, from $90 to $135, but it reflects the cost of staff doing that review, going out and doing an on-site inspection and logging that in our system and filing that permit. The other new fee is a technology fee, which would be a 3% of the building permit fee, and that is specifically to generate the funds necessary to cover our actual expenses on technology that we've seen year over year for that software that I mentioned previously. Additionally, the fire plan check fee is an opportunity for reducing a fee that in evaluating this structure, we recognize that as currently structured, the fire plan check fee is 24% of the structural plan check fee, and that is collected by the fire department. So that has been historically tied to value, not necessarily the work performed. And so under the current year, that generated $93,000 were these fees to go into effect with the increase in structural plan check fee and structural permit fee. That would increase the fire plan check fee by up to $150,000. In looking at that, we recognize that that doesn't really increase the amount of work that need be performed, and so saw it as an opportunity to switch that fee to a per hour cost base. And in doing so, it would generate between $20,000 and $25,000 a year, which reduces the fire plan check fee by $68,000 to $73,000 per year. And again, it correlates the work done to actual costs that the fire department spends on looking at access, hydrants, those sort of things. There's a saltational shift that occurred recently in that the building official, and Stephen could speak to this better than I, is the responsible party for doing the fire plan check and has the certifications necessary to do that review of the internal alarm systems and suppression systems, and so is doing that plan review and inspection. So those are costs that are more appropriately collected by the building division for the work done. And we also do third-party contracts in order to have plan reviewers specialized in fire suppression systems and alarm systems review those. And so that would be part of our professional services budget. So there's a bit of a shift in this, but the end result is it reduces what are currently some significant fire plan check fees on larger commercial projects. In the example shown here of a 30,000 square foot new commercial building, although their total fees increased, the fire plan check fee, which previously was $13,656, would reduce to $375. So again, this chart gives the examples that were provided in your packet with what the fee increases are, and you can see that through the changes, the costs for new accessory dwelling units, single-family homes, and residential additions are essentially flat. They do increase slightly, with the exception of residential addition would be slightly cheaper under the proposed fee structure. It's really the larger scale projects such as commercial and multifamily of 10 units or greater, that would realize an increase in fees.
You should pause 1 second, Brandon. Mary Graham.
Yeah, this is a question for the broader conversation, so I think we can keep going now, Chair, until we get to another stopping point.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Continue, Brandon, please.
So I did note in the packet, the revenue generation anticipated should these fees be approved. You'll notice the fiscal year 2027 is substantially lower than fiscal year 2028. That's in large part because we're already into fiscal year 2027, and we're not proposing to implement any fee changes until January 1st of 2027, so it would only be a half a year. Another reason for asking for a delay on implementation is to allow for developers and builders that have projects in design phase that are preparing to submit, that they not be, if they've already calculated what their costs will be, that they have further time to anticipate, they could submit between now and December 31st and be under the existing fee structure.
Councilor Bloom.
Yeah, thank you. Just kind of a pause here because we're talking about the building permits under structural. So I noticed that under this that multifamily is included with commercials, an increase from $4.30 to $7, which is a pretty significant increase. And I'm wondering, thinking from a policy perspective, if this council and the community is really saying, hey, we would like to see more multifamily, I'm wondering what the math would look like, or if there was ever any consideration given to saying, hey, maybe we need to have this as a separate tier, right? Understanding that it's more complex than a single family residence, but also there's a policy objective that we might want to achieve there.
Yeah, I think that policy objective could come in the form of, again, subsidy for that type of development. I don't know that market rate apartments would be subsidized. Affordable apartments, for instance, the council already recognizes that they don't have to pay systems development charges or the community development fee, which is proposed to increase. So affordable housing wouldn't incur those additions, but a market rate apartment complex would under this scenario.
So, but it would be a conversation that we could have in the future if this council or future council decided to say, hey, we're not seeing a lot of movement on market rate multifamily development. What are the levers we can pull to kind of incentivize those developments?
Right, and obviously, the difference in cost of a $10,000 permit fee is substantial for you and I. For a $8 million multifamily apartment, that may not be a site limiting decision point, but again, it is clearly within council's directive to see how we could look at other incentives to create an environment in which those multifamily apartments could develop here more readily.
Thank you. Can I ask one more?
Sure.
So then kind of a second question, and I'd like to weigh in on this. So one of the things here too is that let's say that somebody is building a multifamily apartment complex, right? And the units are all identical, but they're being charged separately. I'm wondering, is there a mechanism, is there a way to say, look, you've got 10 identical units, we only need to charge you once for review and permitting on that?
So I'll defer to Stephen. My understanding is they're looking at the entirety of the structure, the foundation, all structures, to make sure all elements are meet building codes. So we couldn't necessarily defer because one unit on the far end of a development meets building code that the one on the other side doesn't without reviewing it. Stephen, do you have thoughts on that?
So they're at the building codes division at the state level, they are working on, duplicate plans of maybe residentials, and there's a flat fee that you could charge them, but you have to still realize that with our fee methodologies that we set, we have to be able to operate and run the department. So, but to answer you, yes, there is something like that. And we're supposed to be seeing more of that, something that's like a pre-approved plan. Or potentially if there's in the residential development where the same house is, you're basically doing the same house in 30 developments. It is possible down the road that there's still going to be a flat to where there's going to be a fee charge for it, but there could be a reduction in it.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. And in no way am I saying that these are things that I would advocate necessarily digging into now, because I understand the value and need for this. But I just think it's important for all of us to understand that, it's fluid. That there are levers that we can pull and that we should be thinking about as we kind of go forward and want to see more growth in Ashland. So thank you.
It brings up a very good point, and it's not in my presentation, but when we did the accessory dwelling unit pre-designed plans and pushed those through the building division for review and approval, the intent on that was that if somebody is taking those off-the-shelf plans that have already been reviewed under building code, that they not incur the building permit costs associated with the new plan check and review. So, and I know the state is looking at doing that for accessory dwelling units as well, but also for multifamily development. So it's exciting times.
Yeah, I got it. So I'd just like to remind the council that we're coming up on 7 o'clock, and we still have a pretty meaty conversation here, as well as a very important one coming afterwards. So I'm going to allow this discussion to continue for a reasonably foreseeable future. We'll play it by ear, but I would just be mindful of the time as we move forward, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Yeah, and with that recognition, if you feel I can move forward and
please.
go straight to questions. Essentially, affordable housing construction excise tax, just for people listening, that is allowable under state law for cities to adopt a construction excise tax, which gets assessed on developments. And the proceeds from that get distributed to developer incentives to offset the costs of development. State ownership program, 15% would go to the state for their affordable housing down payment assistance programs. But it also affords our local housing programs an option for 35% of those funds to support the local affordable housing program. The reason this is relevant in terms of the building permit fees is if the council was amenable to enacting a construction excise tax, and I will note that in adoption of the housing production strategy, the council did direct it as a priority to move forward with it. It would create a revenue source by which the council could direct that the developer incentives that I referred to could be used to pay the permit fees associated with affordable housing. And we could also look at our housing program portion and provide that up to households earning up to 120% median income under the local affordable housing program. And so that's a way of seeing a potential revenue that could be generated for the city and how it could be allocated on this slide. So that does bring me to really where you guys want to be in terms of moving into deliberation and discussion and direction of staff.
And Chair, just for the record, I will request a motion to extend.
Sure. Is there a motion to extend?
I move to extend 30 minutes.
Second?
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, Alyssa. I appreciate that. All right. Can you go back one slide if you don't mind? And Mayor Graham.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things when I think about this larger piece. I'm glad to see all of these elements coming together, some of which were in the housing production strategy, as you mentioned, Brandon. But it strikes me, and I appreciate Jordan's comments about what we are doing to incentivize this development, that these fees are not likely to make or break a particular project. I'm glad to see that when the fees are structured so that we are doing full cost recovery, that it's putting us in the middle of the pack. So it's not making Ashland have significantly larger permit fees than anyone else. But it strikes me that our general fund issues, and we were just talking about them at our last business meeting, those are not going to be solved by any single thing. And so while it may look like it's not a lot of subsidy at this point, how we address our general fund issues is going to be with a series of improvements. It's going to be a package of doing things differently. And so it strikes me that this is one of those important things that we can do that is not going to have a negative impact on our community that other types of changes to the general fund might. When I think about the reserve fund, at this point, we could potentially capitalize it with more of that reserve fund in place, because we are right now subsidizing it. We have been subsidizing it for a long time. And so even if what we did in this next biennium was to put that amount that we would have subsidized it or some part of that in to seed that reserve fund, we would still be ahead of the game. And I think it's just important to remember that right now the track we are on is a heavy subsidizing of that permit system. And I'm just reminded of the saying that the best time to plant a tree is 10 years ago, but the second best time is today. And it seems to me that this is something that we could move forward with. And I like the idea of the construction excise tax. The council already, as you mentioned, Brandon, said to come back and let's have a look at that as a way to help us move in the direction of the affordable housing that we need. So as much as I don't like to raise fees or permits, I think this is an important thing for the council to move forward with.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Sherrill.
Thank you, Chair. I want to just start by saying that I want to support this. I think you need a building fund. I think it's best practice. I think that we should slowly continue to wean off of the subsidy that I feel that we need as a community. But I want to remind everybody, just a point of clarification, that this fee isn't about making or breaking the development or a small percentage of the overall cost. This fee goes directly to the end user. This is a $10 a month impact on a tenant or a home purchaser based on the numbers given in the examples a few slides back. And I still think we need it, but it's not as much about can the developers absorb it or will the builders still build. It's that the community members pay this, you guys. This rolls downhill to the customer, which in our case is the Ashlanders. So I just wanted to kind of reframe it. It's easy to talk about big picture stuff, but the person paying it is our neighbor.
Councilor Duquesne.
Question. Brandon, can you tell all of us how much the general fund subsidizes this right now? Do you know?
Well, last year it was 268,000, but over a 5-year period, 115,000 per year.
115K.
Councilor Bloom.
Yeah, thanks. Just hoping, maybe we can, I don't know how long the list is of questions, but maybe we can start to kind of get some resolution on this for all of you. And thank you for giving your time. So I was hoping, Chair, maybe we could kind of go around and kind of check some boxes and give some directions so that we can get movement.
Well, let's go to the next slide, and I think we're about there. So let's take these one at a time. So the first one is what I would assume to be just actually standing up this building fund and funding it. So let's take a little bit of a poll there. Is there any appetite to be able to do this as I look around the dais? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Do you have any questions that you need, any clarification questions relative to number one, Brandon?
No.
And Mayor Graham, just to have you on the record with this, I would assume, is a yes?
Yes, and I'll just raise my hand if I'm a yes for these questions, so you don't have to keep coming back to me.
All right, thank you. Alyssa will help me out with that one. Excellent. Okay, let's move on to number two, which is the proposed fee structure and relative to the exact fee approach that staff has presented here. Any questions or anything? Yeah, Councilor Sherrill.
Yeah, maybe, can I make a statement about that? Does it have to be a question? This is important.
Sure.
I think a lot of the examples we use, we show our comparators and we show middle of the road, and we are middle of the road on a lot of our fees. What's different here is that we have a much higher cost of land, we have a much higher cost of actual labor, we have a much higher cost of annual hazard insurance, and we have a smaller buildable envelope on the land that we have to play with. So it's not an apples to apples comparison, and I think it's important to notice that. I plan to support these. This is not a negative. It's just a point of clarification for the general public that doesn't understand these things and ends up asking when it's done why they're paying for it.
So then I would ask you, is there anything relative to that you would like the council or the public to consider?
No, I think that nothing that I haven't already said. I think considering this, continuing the subsidy from the general fund, it's not a subsidy. I think that we could look at it more as an investment.
Councilor Bloom and then Councilor Kaplan.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate your perspective on all this. Councilor Sherrill will be dearly missed. I would only add, yes, okay, but I would like, with the consent of majority of council here, I would like to also see maybe staff come back with an option to defer system development charges until certificate of occupancy is made. I know how we do things with affordable housing, but at the end of the day, when are those systems being used? It's when they're being occupied, when they're being turned on, and any way, considering that's the highest expense for a lot of development, if there's any way that we could say, hey, go out, build the things, do the things, and then as soon as you're able to start flipping that, let's do it. Sorry, Grant.
Yeah, I know you're in discussion, but I can answer that one. Chapter 4.20, if my memory serves, is under our municipal code right now, establishes that somebody can defer systems development charges until certificate of occupancy, or it's for 1 year or certificate of occupancy, whichever comes first. And also, if somebody wants to defer it for 5 years or 10 years, there's a structure set up in the code in which they can set up a payment plan with interest in order to pay those SDCs over time as rental proceeds come in, for instance.
Thank you. I'll get my head out of Title II and I got to start reading up on Title V then, so thank you.
4.2.
And on those means, just as a follow-up to that, for my edification, how's that mechanism triggered for that first year? Just
Well,
ask,
the
or is
applicant
there-
would have to request it. So if you came in for a building permit, we would say SDCs are due and payable. Or you could enter into an agreement with Public Works Department to defer them until certificate of occupancy.
Got it. Thank you, Brandon. Councilor Kaplan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I appreciate this, and I appreciate all the questions and comments that other councilors have made in bringing this forward. I think the building fund itself is I think we've all agreed is kind of a no-brainer. It's more of an accounting chart of accounts kind of thing. The fee structure, I appreciate the fee structure, and I support moving gradually toward this fee structure that's built at this point for full cost recovery of current expenses. I think we do need to contemplate what happens in that case that Councilor Sherrill posited, where the receipts don't come in, and are we going to have enough of reserve? So I understood that you recommendation was a 15% reserve. You've found a revenue source for actually creating that 15% reserve with 150,000, I think, or is it 115,000 from some other source?
It was 135.
135, so somewhere in the middle. So it's very close. I think we do need to, and I think we are permitted to add additional resources to supplement the building fund if necessary, if we find that we're falling short. And I think your response on if we find that the reserve is getting rather large, we could actually reduce fees at some point in the future. So I think that's a really good way to approach. I will say that whether the fees are paid by the person or the developer passed on to the eventual occupant, as Councilor Sherrill points, or distributed to every single taxpayer in Ashland, they're still paid by somebody sitting around their kitchen table. They may be not the beneficiary of that particular development, but they're an Ashlander nevertheless.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, any other questions relative to number 2? Okay, so relative to the council considering the proposed fee structure that staff has come forward with, how are we doing this around the dais? Yes, 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 yes. Okay, thank you. Do you have any clarification on that, Brandon? We'll move to number 3. Okay. Any further discussion or questions relative to the construction excise tax? Councilor Bloom and then Sherrill.
Yeah, thank you. So this one I want to pause on. I'm not in opposition whatsoever, but I just would like to see us kind of maybe spend a little bit more time in deliberation working through what those numbers look like, what the rates look like. I know that we're kind of unrestricted when it comes to commercial and industrial and what that rate could be, and then we do have some restrictions when it comes to residential. And so I'd like to see and maybe kind of work through what makes the most sense, right? We don't want to completely kill commercial and industrial, but at the same time, we also don't want to put a heavy burden on residential, market rate residential, to achieve an affordable housing element and that kind of just collapses the entire housing system, ecosystem that we're trying to achieve here. So obviously I'd be posing this to my colleagues is I would like to have a follow-up study session to kind of work on that particular element.
Question relative to this right here? Okay, we'll go Councilor Duquesne and Councilor Kaplan. The question for you.
So your question regarding this, Councilor Bloom, is that we separate them out?
Yeah, and it doesn't need to be for much more time. Just for me, I would like to maybe get a little bit more information and be able to spend. I'm considering time here. This is something I feel like we could really chew on a little bit and find a really good solution rather than saying, yeah, okay, sure, go figure it out, and then we do it, and maybe it's not the best solution.
I support that 100% because we need the commercial and we don't want the burden to be, it needs to be separated out. So, yeah.
Councilor Kaplan, do you have a question relative to this?
Let me just a clarifying question because we're getting into timing and process. What I understand the proposal is to pass this to the Housing and Human Services Committee for full development over many months as part of the work program to then come to us with a plan, which I imagine would be with a study session before actually
That's
any
correct.
kind of
Yeah,
adoption.
so we're not, at staff, requesting that you adopt the methodology. It was put forth as an example at this point.
And then, so then a question to my colleagues: do we feel like we need to have a study session in the next few months in order to give the Housing and Human Services Committee that go ahead to do it? Because I think we've got a lot on our agenda in the next few months that I'd like to get on in study sessions.
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine waiting. I've got 2 more years, so I'm a little bit more patient with these things.
Councilor Sherrill.
Yeah, you spoke of the methodology, Brandon. Can you talk about why we started at pretty much the floor of the fee and talk about maybe some neighboring communities, what they've learned over the years? I know Medford's had one for 6 or 7 years. They've deployed some big shots for big wins. Can you talk about just like how you came up with the structure and what you think we benefit to win as a community?
Sure. So essentially, the structure I came up with in terms of between 0.33% and 1% for both residential and commercial by looking at communities around the state, that those are usually the numbers that they land on, is either 0.33% for residential, 1% for commercial, or a variation on that. So in presenting these for council's consideration tonight, looking at what other nearby communities are provided, but we have not done the due diligence of reaching out to those communities, finding out what works, what doesn't. That's part of the expectation that we'd have a broader housing and human services overview looking at it and forming a recommendation to council for what to adopt. So I'm in no comfort position in terms of adopting these numbers at this point. We just wanted to provide them to you as examples of what type of revenue it could generate under these scenarios.
Thank you.
Okay, so just for the clarification, to restate that back to you, Brandon, this is direction to start formulating the process, the numbers, working with the Health and Human Services Committee to be able, or Housing and Human Services Committee, excuse me, to just have these discussions to bring back to council at a study session to move forward at that time.
Correct. It is separate from the building fund and the building permit fees, but is a potential revenue source to assist in some of those permit costs.
Excellent.
So we would expect coming back July 1st to have something adopted prior to July 1st, 2027, so that budget process could incorporate that revenue source.
And part of that would probably, as a follow-up to what Councilor Kaplan was saying, is if we actually go over, well, actually, it was more about the building fund, but as we talked a lot about the downturn or what happens if it's low, but if it's higher, and that's a problem that we want to have, that we would have that discussion at that time of what highest and best use for those funds and where we could put it and so forth. Okay, and that would include possibly this. Okay, so with that, any other questions relative to this, or is council comfortable with giving staff direction to move forward with the formulating recommendations for the CET? Excellent. Okay, I think it's yes all the way around. Brandon, do you have anything else?
Thank you for your deliberations.
Brandon, Steve, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Moving along, looks like it's going to fit perfectly. It's 15 minutes on here. Might have a little bit. So the final agenda item is the Asante payment use proposal. This was brought at the request of Councilors Bloom and and Duquesne. Councilor Bloom, would you like to, thank you, would you like to kick us off with this, please?
Yeah, I would like to. I'd like to start by saying that it's 7:15, and I think that due to the folks that are here and the conversation that this deserves, I move to suspend the rules and extend an additional 30 minutes to 7:45.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a unanimous here?
Aye.
Okay, all right, it's suspended to 7:45. Councilor Bloom?
Great, yeah, so to kind of kick this off, so I felt that, we kind of ended this on an unsure, let's see, and, I look around the room right now, and there's fewer people than there has been before. And my worry is that we let this go on for too long. There's going to be fewer and fewer people, and that the people of Ashland deserve an answer of where we're going to go and what we're going to do with this money. And so Councilor Duquesne and I asked that this be brought back as soon as possible. And so to kind of open it up, I had a conversation with the city attorney, and he was explicitly clear that the language is clear. This isn't discussion of a windfall or what to do with a windfall. The language says if the city should receive unbudgeted revenues, that is the key term. And as he stated, the question for council that we have to answer is, do we follow our financial policies or not? So irrespective of the conversation of the money and value or things like that, the number one question, and this is why I gave 15 minutes initially, is because it shouldn't take too long, is we have to answer the question, does this council want to follow our financial policies, or do we believe that financial policies are flexible and that we can kind of pick and choose when we want to follow them to fit whatever personal or professional or whatever political reason that we want to do so. And so that is the question that I would like to, and Councilor Duquesne would like to pose to council is, should the city follow its financial policies respective to unbudgeted revenues and the $4 million Asante payment?
Councilor Duquesne, do you have anything to add?
I would actually like to, no, not at this time. I would like to hear from our constituents, but not at this time.
Okay, we'll have a little bit of discussion. First, Councilor Hanson, did you have something?
Oh, no, I was just ready to chime in. I appreciate the discussion, and I still feel relative to the presentations from our last round that I'd like to wait and see just exactly how we can do the best good with these funds. I don't feel the urgency to define what to do in this situation. So I haven't moved at all yet without any additional information.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor. With that, if there's no real questions or clarification, I'd like to move to public comment. And since we've moved to 7:45, I will give each person, there are 3 minutes for this. It is an important topic, so we'll get that 18 minutes, and then we'll pick it up on the other side of that. So to start, Suzanne Haveman, followed by Brian Soul, and then Lori Hoagland.
Can you hear me? Again, this matter is very serious. We are at the edge of an abyss in having quality health care in a timely manner and available to us in Southern Oregon. Our primary physician base has almost been wiped out, and our specialty practices are few. Imagine not having medical care available. I mean, I'm speaking real, this is a real situation here. Imagine not having medical care available in a timely manner when you need it for a daughter, son, mother, father, wife, and husband when encountering a medical crisis. I spoke directly with Pam Marsh, our Oregon State Representative, this morning at 8:45. I asked her to hear me out. She listened to me and agreed. Sidewalks and City Hall are not as important as money available to reinstate a healthcare system in a community where access to primary care services and healthcare access has been disrupted. The $4 million was designated to cover a breach of contract that puts a community at risk without adequate healthcare coverage. She agrees that preserving this money for a couple of years is essential to developing new access for healthcare in Ashland. The $4 million is a start. We need millions more, and in time, we will get it. The City Council wanted to hear a plan. I shared this with Pam Marsh this morning. I propose an immediate action plan to develop a committee to go through a step-by-step process to build our health community back. city representative, lawyer, grant writer, bond promoter, business people, physicians, nurses, community members. The plan goes as follows. SOU has already talked about La Clinica expanding on its campus. Sounds great. La Clinica is for students and young people. We've already talked about in our community, we have a high Medicare population, middle-age and Medicare. We need more advanced practices, physicians and hospitals to serve these people. I am also suggesting, let's pursue a medical school that supports a primary care physician curriculum. This will bring young people into our community, young families, those we need to offset the Medicare population that we have. After that, a critical access general hospital with 25 beds and a birthing center. Essential for us. A skilled care facility is needed in Ashland, a mental health facility for our youth. Lastly, very important, the development of a health district covering Southern Oregon, which will draw financial support from a larger geographical area. Benefits a solid community with solid health care for all, and a draw of more families, better economy for us. We need the $4 million to put into an interest account for at least 2 years.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Brian Soul.
Thank you, counselors, assistant city manager and reporter. I'm Brian Soul. I'm a retired physician. I was on the staff of Ashland Hospital providing emergent obstetrical services and gynecological surgery services for around 25 years. The people in Ashland are very upset about Asante abandoning Ashland. They're very aware of the $4 million breach of contract settlement and payment to the city, and they do not want that money going into the general fund. It needs to go to the provision of healthcare services. Oregon is receiving $200 million approximately in federal funding for 2026 from the feds, which is basically kind of a retribution payment for the loss of Medicare and Medicaid payments by the feds. It is estimated in the next 4 years, Oregon will receive about $1 billion. This will be competitive grants, hard to obtain, distributed from the Oregon Health Authority. And I think this $4 million should go to secure consultants and grant writers to assess the needs of our community for health care, to develop a plan. My peers may disagree with me on this, but I think it's a pipe dream to think that we would have the hardware, so to speak, of a hospital here. But we can do a lot of things. There's a lot of seniors who can't get to the pharmacies for vaccines. We could go to them. If we put the money in an interest-bearing account, you could imagine $150,000 to $160,000 a year to be spent. I served on the SEEP ad hoc committee, and we didn't have $1 to spend, and we did important work. I think we should have $4 million to spend, and I think you should consider developing an ad hoc committee to look at the needs of this community for health care and how to spend the money. I understand the concern about the rules of how to spend unbudgeted monies, but there must be a way around that. You can be creative. The city attorney can be creative. You're going to look bad to the citizens of Ashland if this money goes to the general fund. I think it's very important that we seize the opportunity now that Asante has abandoned us, and to work with our partners like SOU, with the school district, with our biggest employers like OSF, and with Asante. We're going to need Asante. They're going to be the big provider and backbone of healthcare in this valley. But we really, I think, need to have a committee to think about how to spend this money and to think about how Ashland can support our community in healthcare, or the citizen of Ashland proper, or the citizen of Ashland general, like maybe the school board, the district borders, etc. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Lori Hoagland, and then we'll finish up with Barbara Cooper, Alan Sandler, and John Maurer.
morning to attend the Wyden Reimagining Healthcare Forum that was held at La Clinica Acute Care Center. And during that conversation, we heard from the Oregon Hospital Association, we heard from the medical directors of Road Community Health, La Clinica, Valley Immediate Care, and they all had very disturbing news for us. That we are actually, at this moment, barely entering into a healthcare abyss. That the HR1 is going to hit our state, and Pam Marsh was at this meeting as well. They anticipate a $500 million deficit created by OHP members not being able to stay on OHP. It's going to have eligibility requirements. People are going to have to provide concrete information about work, and they're going to have to be reapplying every 6 months. That starts in 2027. So what I heard is that this community is going to continue to lose services. The hospital is just the beginning. And so I am deeply worried that if we don't protect this $4 million, that we are going to see things happening that we will not have the resources to apply for grants, to do an appropriate survey of what our immediate residents are experiencing. There was a concern for the workforce and being able to have adequate doctors and staff. There was a concern for revenue, keeping these businesses open in our community. So it's not just medical care. We're talking about employment. We're talking about a lot of things that are going to affect our community beyond just basic health care. So that was what I wanted to report today about the importance of this $1 million being protected.
Thank you. Barbara Cooper.
Good evening, I should say. I'm Barbara Cooper, I'm a resident for 46 years and worked at 12 hospitals, 35 years all combined. I'm here to speak on behalf of setting aside the $4 million from Asante into a separate account for the next few years. These funds should be earmarked for the anticipated healthcare needs relative to retaining and replacing the services being lost in the dismantling of our Ashland Community Hospital. In the gathering of hundreds of signatures from community members that were signing in favor of having our hospital returning to full service hospital. Along with that came the hundreds of conversations that each person had. Nobody ever said they didn't want it, and there was a disappointment and fear and that came with every person that signed and stopped to talk about it, and almost everyone did. So I know we have the community support to do this, and the $4 million is needed as a resource for our surveys and grant writing and community needs and desires and the research, planning, costs, pilot studies, all those things that we wouldn't be able to do without it. The $4 million should remain in the realm of the healthcare for our community because it was originally designated for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Alan Sandler.
Alan Sandler, we had a meeting with you guys about a little Russian. At the last meeting, I pretty much talked about the money is not that important. Everybody is talking money. What we have to have is our plan. John Moore has come up already with a sensational way of going after it. I think I sent around what Maine did with Susan Collins. How she recently got, $1 billion or something like that, 190 million. I thought last time you get to the government. There's money available for it, and John has done a tremendous amount of work, and I'm here to support him. I don't know too much about medical, as much as I know about business, and I know that this would be absolutely spectacular if you start thinking about what you're going to do with your money. You take the take the $2 million that you're allowed to do, take your other $2 million, do whatever else you want to do with it. At our last meeting, you guys were talking nothing about how are we going to spend our money, what are we going to do about it? You know, I don't know. It's just that I thought that we would be able to, we haven't been able to finish the presentation to you. We thought we would make the presentation to you in October. We all said that's when we would talk about it again. So I don't really know what to do. I mean, if you're interested and you want John and I and a few other people help you to come up with this plan, which is brilliant. He's got it from other people, how you have to do with this voting and all. He'll probably tell you more about it. But just let us know if, are we going to be able to make a presentation without more of this stuff coming in, getting in the way out. So I don't mean it negatively, you guys do a great job. But in this case, we're beating it too hard. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to know if we're going to be able to make a presentation in October and not have a lot of fanfare between now and the time we make a presentation.
Thank you. John Maurer.
Good evening, all. John Maurer, 50 years here in town. Ironically, it was exactly 2 years ago today, I brought to your attention that Asante was not acting the way it was talking. I put you on notice that there was not going to be a general hospital here in the near future. That came to pass. I just say that so that you can perhaps grasp what I'm telling you. I'm looking for some credibility, I suppose. Councilor Bloom, I want to direct you specifically questioning your policy. Right? You had tonight, you were presented with the creation of a fund. Councilor Dale has made it very clear. A fund generates its money, it keeps its money. The hospital had a fund, has a fund. How do I know that? Well, I don't think you find in your notes anywhere that the hospital fund was ever discontinued. It wasn't removed. The hospital fund has been in existence. I know it was there in 2010 when one of your distinguished predecessors, Dennis Slattery, okay, two-term council member, was one of the architects along with his wife, Sandra, putting together the affiliation agreement. That affiliation agreement took almost a year to complete. And why was that? No one in town trusted what Asante wanted to do with the marketplace. It wanted the market, for sure. But what was it going to do with it? Everyone, every position on staff was concerned. Every member of the board of trustees of the hospital was concerned. And certainly the foundation, with millions of dollars in hard assets, was concerned it was going to be all turned over and taken to Medford, leaving us as we are today. That was the reason the $4 million. First of all, $10 million for the first couple of years, so they wouldn't bolt in the first couple of years, and the $4 million for 15 years. It was dedicated to the proposition: should Asante back away, move everything from Medford, that we would have $4 million to present access to health care for its members, the community. That's what you're faced with here right now. Yes, this $4 million, the intent, Commissioner Dale, what was the intent of the people that architected, created that agreement? It was very clear. It was to preserve healthcare access in Ashland should it be removed. If I can continue with what was left over from my...
I would love to, but it needs to be equal. I'm sorry, Dr. Maurer. Thank you.
I would like to tell you why it's so critical and why Senator Wyden is in trouble. I'd like to tell you that, but maybe for another time.
Thank you.
I can tell you what we're going to do moving forward.
Further discussion, Councillor Bloom.
Yes, thank you, and thank you everybody for the testimony there. I think this is important to clear a few things up. There is not a health fund that exists anymore. There certainly was, but it doesn't exist anymore. I know I just went through all of our funds. It's not there. And maybe that's a value question. Maybe we should have a hospital fund or a healthcare fund. That's certainly something I think that we could consider. A health district is simply not financially viable, let alone politically viable. I mean, you can run the numbers on it. It simply is not going to generate enough revenue, money, to be able to fund or do anything significant with healthcare. And I'm going back to my previous comments. I believe that healthcare is a universal human right. The state should be, it's in our Constitution, the state should be providing for this. The federal government should be providing for this. I do not disagree. This is about the money that's before us and about whether we consistently follow our financial policies. I think that this idea of having a committee set up for the purpose of discussing ideas is problematic. I think that that's where projects go to die. And I think that there's a higher and best use for the remaining 2 million that could actually benefit folks in the long run. I will comment, I appreciate what Rep. Marsh said. She is our state rep. I would suggest that she has the power to pull real levers to help bring healthcare and help fund healthcare in the city of Ashland, the district that a city in the district that she represents. And I'd encourage her to take the lead on that. I'd also like to just clarify and dispel any confusion here that money doesn't just disappear into the general fund. That is not what the financial policies state. What it states is there's an allocation that goes to our reserves, to capital and unfunded liabilities like PERS, important things that have real impacts on our finances here in the city of Ashland, and discussions that will be ongoing about this. This conversation about an interest-bearing account, that's great, but we're looking at taking $4 million and turning it into $4.3 million, right? And waiting 2 years or more to come up with a plan, and meanwhile, people are still suffering in Ashland. That money isn't being put in, potentially $2 million being put into its highest and best use to actually help the people of Ashland. I'd like to point everybody's attention to the grant program for early learning. In 4 years, we took $500,000 for a grant program. We've created, through that funding, there's been the creation of new facilities, childcare facilities for families in Ashland, expanded toddler and infant care that otherwise was a massive deficit, has seen direct real subsidies to dozens of families where mothers who have lost loved ones are able to go back to work, where two parents are able to work at the same time, and children are able to get health care, which is child care and early learning, that they need. And so we can have a conversation about whether we follow this policy or not, but I would pose to my colleagues and to the community that if we really wanted to make a difference in healthcare and help people directly, actually have a real impact, then maybe we create a grant program. Maybe we take that $2 million, we create a healthcare grant program, run through the Housing and Human Services Committee, and open that money up so that the brilliant people in this room and around our community that have ideas can come forward, can petition for that money, and actually start to have a real direct impact on the people's lives in this community. That's making a difference. And in the meantime, we work to pressure our state legislators, to pressure our senators and congresspeople to actually do the right thing and fund healthcare at the level that it deserves, not pennies on the dollar. We can do real work with this money, and I think sitting on it for 2 years would be a disservice to the people of this community that need help right now.
Councillor Kaplan.
Thanks, Chair. So the money currently sits, the money was received a few months ago. It currently sits in the General Reserve Fund, $3.2 million there. It's $0.8 million, $800,000 in the Capital Improvement Fund. I appreciate Councillor Bloom's passion and eloquence about possible uses of this money that would have a healthcare benefit. I'm sure that those are great ideas, and I think there are other great ideas. So what I would prefer to do is let's put it in a special healthcare investment fund. Let's create a special healthcare investment fund and decide how to use it only over the next 2 years. And if it's not used within that time, then it would go into the capital investment fund and the the general reserve fund in some proportion. It's not locking it up not to be used for 2 years. It's locking it up so that it's there so that we can figure out how best to use it. Because I agree with Alan Sandler. I don't know the best way to use it right now. We need a plan. I don't know if it's a committee or what it is, but I don't really feel like we need to make a hasty decision to take this money away from that other possible greater use. So I'd like to either add an extra policy that would characterize how this money can be used within the reserve fund and the capital investment fund, or take it out of there and put it into a health investment fund for a short period of time, for 2 years, to be reappropriated in July 2028 if it's not used before then. Just buy ourselves some time.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Duquesne. I know we're running short on time, and that's okay, because I don't know if we're going to get to a decision tonight, but go ahead.
No, I doubt that we will, but I'll be brief. I appreciate everybody coming forth in your steadfastness, and I appreciate everything that was brought forth. I look at this, I'm kind of mixed. So if we don't adhere to the financial policy, then we're writing another policy. Do we just make policies and bend them to fit what our needs are? And then on the same hand, I look at this money did come from the hospital. This money is healthcare money, and that's a human right. I would like to, if we are going to deviate from financial policy, I would still like this money to be directed in the need and the services of healthcare. I love the proposal of the grants. I love that proposal because I have seen childcare go from 0 to 100 and the people that they've taken care of and how they've extended. So to keep this money in a position where it can continue, well, it's not doing anything right now, but it can be used towards healthcare is important. Do I have grandiose ideas that we're going to open up Ashland Community Hospital as it was, next year? No. So I'm just being realistic about it. I know we're not going to get to any decisions, but I am in favor of extending this. I'd like to hear more about this proposal that the doctor says that he has, because if we don't have a plan, a vision, we have nothing. In the meantime, I would like this body to hold on to the money and move forward with health care.
Mayor Graham.
Thank you, Chair. I would agree with Councilor Duquesne. Money comes to us in different colors because of the fact that we're local government. A lot of it comes with restrictions. With this money, we have the potential to do something. I'm interested in some of the things that Councilor Bloom mentioned, more so in terms of how might we leverage that so that we have an ongoing funding source for things that matter for us that are health impact or health related. But I definitely am interested in that. And if we need to revisit our financial policies, we're doing that anyway. So if there's, I'm not super keen to not follow written policies. I can make a good argument, I think, about why maybe this is different. But if we need to go back and revisit those policies and create a pathway for this, I'm all for doing that as well.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Hansen.
Yeah, in 1 minute or less, I've seen this community do amazing things with money for grants and propping up entrepreneur grants and child care grants. So I'd like to see this, like my colleague explained, in a separate fund and wait for these ideas to bake and see what comes down the pipe that we could actually really spur some seed money, some boost money, but then with the leftover money, if it's in a healthcare fund, to be able to continue those efforts in the form of grants to help out people in our community. I love that idea. I don't just see the urgency to shift it into our square pegs and round holes right now. I think we just investigate moving it over, saving it, and let the community continue to build their solutions and see how we can best get it to the finish line.
Thank you. And I would just wrap this up because I appreciate we're coming up on time here. But I would just add that I understand that there is a lot of brilliant minds here that can do some very interesting and innovative things. I would say that we keep using the word policy, and it is a policy, but it's a policy contained within a resolution. And there are many things that we do relative to resolution. We do parks fees, we do wildfire fees, we do public safety. We do all kinds of stuff with respect to resolution. So I said it before and I will say it again. I don't think it's one or the other. I think that we can thread this needle gracefully. To me, I don't think it's about the money. I really don't. I think it's about the ideas that we can have. We can figure this out, but I do think that we get a legal opinion, we follow the laws and the rules of this municipality, and we update them as we see fit as we move forward. But with that, there is plenty more discussion to have. We are not going to solve this tonight. I look forward to further presentations. I'm sure this council does in the relatively near future. And we've got a lot of hard work ahead of us, and I know we're all up for that because this is so incredibly important. So thank you all very much for your time tonight. Appreciate everyone and their testimony. And with that, the meeting is adjourned, and have a wonderful evening.